Okay, good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning.
Good morning.
Just letting everybody in. Okay, let's see. I think everybody's let in. Ah, there's another one. Good morning, good morning. It's funny. Apparently, a lot of people have arguments that they can't get out of. This has been a very um, a very big topic that a lot of people have responded to. So I'm really excited about diving into this today. Just admit. And to all the new people, welcome. So awesome to have so many new people here today. Let's see, what time is it? Okay, I'll give it one more minute. We're at 9:01, and then we're just going to go right in. Right in. Hi, Dallas. I'm glad you snuck in just under the radar. Hi, Kelly. Hi, Jill. Good morning. Whoa, Nancy, that's some nice hair you got going there. Very glam.
I'm trying to grow it out.
That's very nice.
And congratulations, Grandma.
Oh, thank
Or
you.
are you Gigi?
I'm Gigi.
You're Gigi.
I'm
Okay.
Gigi. I'm Gigi.
Okay.
Do this. There we go. Yes, I am Gigi. I'm completely in love, and I am that person that just bombards friends with baby pictures. So, um, I've invited my daughter to join us last minute. She's probably still sleeping and probably hasn't even seen the invite yet, but she is a great person to join in on this topic because she has been trained in RLT, which is not sure if you're familiar with Terry Real. If you aren't, you should look him up. He has a great book called Us. And let me see, I'm going to be doing this. Okay, there we go. And she's got trained in relational therapy. So she has a lot of good insights on all of this stuff. But as a new mom who probably didn't get a lot of sleep last night, she's probably still sleeping with a 3-week-old baby. So whether or not I told her she doesn't have to go on camera because she's probably would be in her bathrobe and sweats like she is every day right now. But we'll see if she can make it. Okay, so I'm going to jump in, and if people come late, they come late. That's fine. So oh, hold on one second. I cannot. Okay. Okay. Just checking people reaching out to get on. Okay. All right. So one of the things that I've found that has been the most profound, one of the tools that you can really build on that has the most profound impact in your life will be how to manage conflict and how to communicate in a way that leads to repair as opposed to what most of us experience, which is a feeling of losing control, being manipulated or dominated, fear of what not being seen and understood could grow into. And our nervous system gets activated, and then all form of communication can break down. So, what does it mean to be relational? So, the idea of being relational is the idea that everything that we do is based on the premise of it's a bid for connection. To be relational is looking for ways to connect rather than disconnect, rather than put up walls. We fear that someone else will disagree with us. And then we hyper focus on needing them to see things our way and be validated in that way. And so creating resilience around the idea that you can be okay and you can be safe and have someone disagree with you. You know, there's what if you ever take improv classes, they're super fun. And the whole idea of improv is you have to really develop the ability to work off of another person. So what happens is you have to get out of your own head because so much of us are in our head about waiting for our chance to talk, what are we going to say? How are we going to influence this? And it's actually focusing on what's coming from the other person. And so all of our focus has to be on the other person. And then we develop the skill to respond in the moment. But there are rules. And the first rule of improv is always respond with yes and. So the idea is if somebody says, oh my God, an alien just landed in my backyard and is eating my dog, what do I do? And if someone says, no, it didn't, or oh, I don't like that. That's not a nice picture. I don't, well, it's made up. It's funny. But you just end the scene's gone. The scene ends, right? But what if they said yes, and they're actually not eating my dog? They're just squishing my dog so much and loving them and holding them that I can't even see my dog anymore. And now I'm going to go in the backyard and see if I can talk to them. And now the other person has something to grab onto and continue the back and forth of communication. That's what communication is sharing ideas and being able as much, it's so important to be able to take in what's coming as it is to be able to share what we're trying to say. And we tend to hyper focus on what we have to say and look and sift through what's coming at us for what we want to respond to instead of fully taking it in, especially in charged conversations. So if you think about the idea of yes and, right, we can then start to really notice our language around how we relate to others, whether it's partners, friends, family. A lot of times I call, especially with family and partners, we can get into what I call just these are conversational ruts. These are ruts in our relationship. And if you don't know what a rut is, it's a deep groove in like a dirt road where no matter what you try to do, your car just tends to slip right in. Every time you're in the rut, you're in the rut. So we can go into these conversations with an open mind, thinking that we're going to have it be different. I'm going to call my mother and it's going to be a different conversation. And then we hang up the phone so frustrated because we realize we had the same conversation that we always have, the same hurts, the same, ways of defending all of it. So how do we change this? That's the big question. How do we change this? And so often we're so focused on how do we change them? You know, how how do I change my mother? How do I make her different? How do I change my partner? How do I change my wife? How do I change my coworker? They drive me crazy. And the truth is you can't change them. And the fact that that's what we focus on ends up robbing us of where our true power lies, which is in changing ourselves and the way we respond. And but we want to do it because we are learning better ways of being, not because we're trying necessarily to influence the other person. Because if we're only doing it to try and influence the other person, then that's not being truthful. And it's more goes into like a manipulation than it is actually being honest. So, if you haven't heard of the Gottman Institute, they talk about the fact that every interaction that we have with another human being is either a bid for connection, it's either a bid for connection, it's ignored, or it's fully rejected. And every time a bid for connection is not met by someone leaning in to the bid for connection, connection gets damaged. The ease in which we can connect gets harder and harder. So what we want to do is be sure that in our language and in our body language and our way of being, that we are creating the most fertile ground for connection and communication and being able to take in information and being able to build deeper relationships. So how many people fall into the trap of sometimes in frustrating conversations using words like you always and you never? The problem with you always and you never is that they are an accusation and they minimize everything that comes before it and can taint what comes after it. So we want to really start to pay attention to our language. Language is very, very important. And I want to touch on something. I want to stop here and touch on something that's really also a key piece to this. As you start to navigate and try some of these things, you might find it really difficult in situations where your nervous system gets activated. So if you start to feel, most people talk about it down in the gut, that like burning or tingling or rise of energy that begins to start there. It may be necessary for whatever conversation that's happening for you to take a break from that. But what's going to help you is to create a framework around this ahead of time. So creating a lot of the framework around how you're going to be successful at this is going to take place when you're not in conflict. So talking to someone maybe that you have had conflict with when everyone has a regulated nervous system and nothing is happening and there is no issue, and saying, hey, I'm really working on when I feel like I get activated by conversations that I feel are highly charged or I get defensive in. So what I'm practicing is if I feel that, I'm going to I'm going to do a timeout. I'm going to take a break. I'll let you know I need, I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to do whatever. I'm going to walk away from the conversation, but I am not abandoning you or the conversation. I will tell you when I will be back so that I can come back and show up and be able to hear you and listen. So when you preemptively set a framework around this stuff, you are also giving other people unconsciously the opportunity to do things different as well. And you would be surprised how many people are happy to meet you there, no matter how deep those ruts may be. But it has to start with us. So maybe you start to get into it with a partner. You feel that coming on. You've already set the stage, right? And even if you haven't set the framework yet, you can say, "Look, I feel myself getting activated. I want to be able to talk to you about this, but I know if I'm upset about it, I'm not going to be able to. So I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to go for a drive. I'm going to go to my room, whatever it is, and I'm going to take about 30 minutes or I'm going to take an hour. Can we talk about this again an hour from now? If it's too late at night, everyone's tired, can we talk about this tomorrow? I really do want to hear what you have to say, and I really do want to have this conversation. Would you be willing to talk about it tomorrow? Now, sometimes you might be in a situation where this is someone that's very close to you. One of the things about being close to someone is the closer you are, the more that the trust aspect of the familiarity aspect goes up, but the respect goes down. So they may have ways of maybe they follow you. Maybe they go, no, I want to talk about this right now, or like, or something where they're insistent. So if that happens, you have to have in your mind a plan A, a plan B, a plan C. So the plan A might be making a request. My request is, can we please talk about this at this time? I really do want to talk about this. I really want to try and work this out, even if we end up not seeing eye to eye, but we need to be able to talk about it. Can we do this in an hour? Can we do this tomorrow? What the next maybe plan B is if the person is not really allowing me, then I'm going to have to leave the house and go for a walk, right? And I'm going to tell them what I'm doing. What you don't want to do, the reason that we're telling them, because maybe you're like, God, I don't like want to tell this person. I want to tell them to piss off, get out of my face, stop berating me, stop harassing me, and leave me alone. But what happens is that becomes a form of abandonment. And when people feel like they're being abandoned or shut out, they pursue. And the feelings of abandonment and being shut out create more fuel for that fire. So you being able to hold the space for yourself, which is I'm being activated and I don't want to relate this way anymore. So I am going to take responsibility for me, myself, and my nervous system. And I'm going to take myself out so I don't contribute to this. I don't argue or say anything I wish I didn't say. But I'm not leaving. I want to work this out. Let's decide when we can meet again. And then having your B, C, maybe even D of how you hold that boundary for yourself. And how you hold that boundary is going to be how you hold that boundary is going to be dependent on you being committed to it and not feeling like the other person has to change. That you are committed to your boundary around yourself. We're never telling another person I'm setting a boundary with you or this is my boundary. Never, ever use those words because why? They're not relational. We don't want this language. We want to create space. The next thing is you want to be able to make repairs. Repairs are super important. And much in the way Brene Brown talks about being vulnerable feels like you're being weak, but yet it looks like courage. It's actual power. Making repairs, initiating repair can lead to feelings of why am I always the one that has to say sorry? Or why am I always the one that needs to repair? True repair is actually true accountability. You are not taking on an oversized sense of responsibility for what is breaking down, what is causing the disagreement. All you are doing is taking accountability for your part. So if you have been indignant in the past, if you have said things that you wish you hadn't said, if you have behaved in ways that you wish you hadn't behaved, no matter how much the other person may have instigated that in you or pushed your buttons or any of those things, being accountable takes a lot of the charge out of the cause of the conflict. Remember when you're being accountable to not use the word but. You know, I know I blew up. I know I said things. I'm really sorry. But when you blah, 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 or but I'm really stressed, or but I can't help it. The but, as you all know, when you've been on the receiving end of this, just kind of takes all of the growth work out of the accountability share in the first place. I think another thing that's really important to understand is that especially I feel, especially in relationships with parents or partners, we have some really strong expectations of what that should look like and of how that other person should play the role that we have cast them in so that we can finally get our needs met. We can finally feel what we've been seeking. And when conflict comes up, we tend to feel like everything is wrong. Everything's going wrong. We're completely out of alignment. This isn't supposed to be happening. But the truth is, conflict is natural. It's natural. It's going to happen. Believing that it's not going to happen or that it shouldn't happen is going to make you less able to be present and listen and make repair when it does show up. So if we go into all of our relationships understanding that conflict is natural, that it's going to happen at some point in time, then we're not going to be so triggered by it when it does happen. I want to be able to open up right now and um, ask people if they have anything they want to share, any questions, or any situations that they have found themselves in that they would like us to really like maybe use as an example of how to handle a certain conflict. Marilyn,
Hi.
hi.
I just wanted to say something that's really helped.
Hmm.
I've just gone through this kind of really huge sort of transition where I was feeling like hopeless about my marriage and that, you know, we've just been in this dynamic of just arguing, and I was feeling really triggered and I couldn't, it just seemed hopeless. And I just, I didn't want to split up, but it was like, oh, the energy between us was just so horrible. And I just couldn't imagine how it would ever change. I couldn't ever even imagine it.
Hmm.
And I went into this, a couple of things. I learned about how in that if you're in a dynamic that can be like a chemical thing where you're looking for your dopamine response and your partner and you're going alternating between your dopamine response and your stress response and so I that was kind of helpful. I started looking for how I was looking for that from my partner. Oh, he liked what I said. Oh, he didn't like what I said, and I'm going back and forth and that kind of horrible thing. um but the kind of wonderful turning point was I was just feeling kind of hopeless, and I sent a message to my friend um, in the middle of the night who I didn't expect to answer, and just shared what was going on. And she did this heart connection thing with me that I just immediately felt, and I felt my heart just filled with love, and and it was so powerful and so wonderful that I had actually, moved. I was on the couch in the middle of the night because I couldn't even stand to be in the same room. But I went back to the bedroom and I was just filled with so much love, and I could see my partner in this sort of new way. And we just actually had a really nice connection that was kind of surprising me. And so it's still kind of new, but I'm just feeling so hopeful that things can turn around just by number one, sort of owning my own responses, not playing the victim or not falling into that trap of, like you were talking about boundaries and, setting things up where they're going to fail. And also just realizing just how much power I have by in that I can change myself and I can be empowered. And as that empowered person, I'm not going to be defensive. I'm not going to fall into those patterns. So that's kind of the thumbnail version of it. But I just was really hopeful. I'm feeling so much hopeful and so much better.
Well, you demonstrate what happens. You know, resistance needs something to push against. And that's how we end up in these ruts, right? That both people are pushing against each other. And when one of the two stop pushing back, then it really takes down the effects of that force of the push because there's nothing to resist. There's no resistance, right? I don't have to change your mind. Hold on. I don't have to change your mind. I don't have to win. There's a great article that I shared on Facebook, and I'll share it in our Facebook group. Uh, and it was a couple that that did Terry Real's relational therapy, and they did it at a super reduced rate for in exchange for them being filmed and the process being used as part of his training program. And so, that's a real courageous and vulnerable thing to do. And you should really check out what he wrote about the experience. The husband wrote it. But what he said was like, the thing about Terry is that he doesn't pull punches. He really challenges these toxic ways of getting our needs met. And one of the things that the husband was presenting was he was always feeling judged. And he was always judging his wife about whether or not she was loving him enough. And then he would hold all these resentments and then he would blow up. And then eventually she would try to do all the bids for connection. And those bids for connection would make him feel loved until all of his own insecurities would start to find, oh, what did she mean by that? And then the whole cycle would repeat itself. And when you talk about the dopamine thing, it reminds me of what he learned was that he was a love addict, is the framework that it was explained in, is that you need so much validation because of the fact that it's your own insecurities that you need to work on, but you're trying to project those onto your wife. That's not her job, is to make you feel a certain way. And when she doesn't do that, then you leave, you blow up, you leave the relationship. So I think that what you're talking about here kind of that's also a representation of that same dynamic, right? Which is we have to start to figure out what is our side in all of this. Even if you have, there's the idea of the overt and the covert in relationships. The overt would probably be this husband where he blows up. He's overt, like he is the one that's acting out most. But the covert has their own ways of throwing in their barbs and trying to take power back. And even though that may have been built in response to the overt, we still have to address both sides. So we all play a role in all of our relationships. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I also think, I mean, I realized I married my father.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Married my mother.
yeah. So, just understanding like this is old and it's really mine.
Mhm.
And it's up to me to focus and heal myself. It's not my partner's job to do that.
But
And
that partner will reflect to you. They will mirror for you where your work is. And that's
oh
the beauty.
yeah.
Right. And that's the beauty of even doing this work. Like, even if you're right now in a relationship that you're like, there is no way that this relationship can be healed. Again, whether it's a partner, whether it's a parent, whether it's a friend, that is fertile ground for practice. Because whatever you do in that relationship, how you practice this way of being, you will take into all of your other relationships and you will be better for it. Even if at the end of the day, there's a no contact decision or there is a divorce, what you learn by practicing in the relationship, because you will get that neural pathway built. You will feel the feeling in your body of what it means to stand in that space and not defend and not shrink back. And that is a kinesthetic learning that needs to happen. And then we can actually take it into our other relationships and other situations. So thank you, Marilyn.
Yeah. Well, I've always jokingly said my marriage is a spiritual path. And and the longer I've been married, the more it has become that.
The more it's shown itself to be
Yeah,
exactly
gotta
that.
get better.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you so
Yeah,
much for
welcome.
sharing all of that. Rochelle?
Hi. Um, so I just have next to me to remind myself what I was going to say. Your question on your Facebook post, which was why do we keep rehashing the same arguments and what can we do about it? So for me, when I have an argument, I see it as from both sides there's unmet needs. So I try and ask what are those unmet needs? I try and look for them. And for me, at one point, normally there's a switch where I shut down and like all my self-worth has gone. And I realized through talking to my partner about it that it's coming from my childhood and because I was bullied basically from when I was about 5 or 6 years old until I was maybe 22. So long time bullying and never really fitting into any social groups, and always being the one that was bullied, no matter which group I was put in, that's how it was. And I noticed that that response was coming from that. So now that I'm aware that it's maybe the 7 year old or the 15 year old or whoever it is who's coming forward in that moment and that it's not present me, I'm then able to meet myself a bit more with compassion and love and tell that child that I'm okay and that she can have the space to hurt and to tell me how she's feeling and to tell my partner how she's feeling and then move through that. And I find that very helpful, actually.
Yes. Yes. And sometimes like really simplifying this work is the way that it actually gets to integrate the easiest. So it could be my only goal is that I am going to take a breath and take 5 seconds before I respond to things. I'm going to take a breath and I'm just going to wait and let something sit with me before I respond. It could be that also that idea of like really, really paying attention to when you feel that little gurgling starting down here of your nervous system being activated, a little burning light, pilot light starting to burn, right? Because the thing is that once we are activated in our nervous system, we just don't have the access to our wise mind, to the intentions that we were going to have going into these relationships, right? Or into these conversations. So knowing that we want to bail out of the boat before we crash. And
Yeah.
the beauty is that like like all neural pathway work, once the more that you practice this, the more it starts to build up in your subconscious. And the subconscious is the area that you can have access to when your nervous system is activated, as long as it's not a full blown, you know, offline moment. But so that's why we want to practice. It's kind of very much like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, where you practice things when you're not activated so that when you become activated, you can pull on them because there's already the neural pathway in your brain for that thing.
Yeah, it's like sort of modifying and growing new behavior patterns.
Yes.
Acknowledging when the old ones show up, but then offering yourself new ones.
And I'll add one thing too. A lot of times, like when you talk about the bullying, right? That was the lens, and the lens kept showing up in different situations, no matter what situation you felt like you were in, different groups, that piece kept showing up. And one of the things that happens, and I talk about this when I work with people in IEMT, is that when you get that core memory, that core experience, that first time that you ever felt judged and bullied by a group, that created a painful memory, right? And that painful memory created a part of you that was on the lookout to protect yourself from that. And what that looks like is it almost looks like rose-colored glasses, but they aren't rose-colored, right? They're a lens that you're seeing the world through. So after that initial painful moment, a part of you will look for in every situation how you're not accepted to keep you safe. So in other words, if I get told I'm stupid, right, when I'm a kid, the first time someone says that to me, I am going to be crushed. And if you'll understand, there's a system, I don't want to get too far into this because it's a whole other conversation, but there's a system called internal family systems. It's a way of viewing the way our mind works, right? And in IFS, what IFS tells us is that the part of you that was wide open, that this loving, beautiful, innocent, wide open part of you that got rejected in that moment, that gets banished to the dungeon. We exile that part. That part, look at what that part did. It just caused us pain. That part can't be trusted. In its place becomes a manager. And what that manager is, it's one of those negative voices in our head. The manager's job is to keep you from feeling pain because pain to the mind leads to death. Pain is to be avoided. So now we have a manager that's like a drill sergeant that says, why do you think anybody cares about you? Why do you need to belong? Why do you always do this? Stop trying, stop looking. So every situation that I am in, if I got told I'm stupid and that hurt me and I got a manager and that part of me got exiled, every single situation I'm in, no matter how subtle, I am scanning for how people think I'm stupid. I am scanning for how I'm being stupid. I am judging everything I say as, oh my God, what do you even know what you're talking about? It's all reinforcing. It's all reinforcing. And we don't really have a good ability to have perspective about what's actually happening because that lens is so magnified. So what can happen too is that we end up creating unconsciously attracting situations that reinforce this because that's what the manager wants, because it feels like you need to be afraid of this and stay away from this to stay alive. Hopefully that makes some kind of sense. I highly suggest Dick Schwartz's book, No Bad Parts. If you're interested in internal family systems, No Bad Parts is just brilliant in how it breaks down how this system creates itself, why it creates itself, and how we can work within the system to change. Okay, Brian.
Um, so I kind of have a question
Mhm.
that kind of relates to something that I'm thinking about engaging in. Do you think that seeking to repair a relationship can ever be selfish?
Well, let's define selfish, right? So here's something that I learned a long time ago that really diminished that self-judgment around doing something and being selfish. Every single human being doesn't do a damn thing unless it's for themselves. And I'm gonna elaborate on that. Even people like a Mother Teresa, right, that's held up as this beautiful version of someone who was selfless, right? She did all the things she did because it felt good to her to do them. That was what she was driven to do. That's what she came here to do. She was living her purpose, right? So if you look at it like every single human being is, we can only do things that come up naturally within us, right? And so it would be easy if we're very judgmental of ourselves, which is a trauma response, being hyper judgmental of our own motivations and actions. Well, if you look at it like we all only do what feels good to us to do, then you can let go of all of these judgments. Any kind of repair is a good thing, right?
Yeah. Did you want me to go further into that? I'm not
I
really sure.
do. Yeah, go ahead.
Um, so I'm going to try and get into this briefly and not sound like I'm gossiping or anything like that. But I was working at a ranch with a horse specifically for a long time, and I didn't really engage with the owner very much, but she likes to start drama, and she came up with some reasons to just kind of, boot me out of there. But I never engaged her about it directly
Mhm.
because, I just have a pretty good sense that that's kind of what she was looking for, some kind of a reaction out of me. So I just didn't give it to her. I just kind of left. But I kind of held myself off from really kind of showing any sort of emotion or anything about the fact that this was the last time I was gonna see this horse that I spent 8 months working with very closely. And so it's kind of put me in grief. And recently I've been having some dreams and just some feelings that maybe I should try and do something to maybe reconnect and mend that relationship enough to at least, kind of pay my respects to this animal and bring closure. And so it's kind of like, well, I could just never interact with it and there will never be hard feelings, or I can take the risk and put myself in the line of fire of this person who can be quite nasty. So I'm
Right.
not quite sure which road to take.
Well, I don't believe in accidents. And if you believe, I mean, you may or may not, you may not, but if you believe that this experience we're having called life is about evolving and growing, then I think that we're put in situations like this. I think that your love of the horse is the motivator that was created for you to look at doing something that you wouldn't normally do in this situation.
Yeah, he's kind of pushed me into a lot of different directions.
All right. So can I ask a couple questions? Is that okay?
Yeah.
When, at what point did you decide or come to the conclusion that this person was very drama and and or nasty?
Well, other than firsthand accounts from multiple people she's worked with, I've seen her cause someone who she's had a working relationship with for 10 years have some sort of a immense meltdown,
Mhm.
which, and I mean, just in the middle of the ranch in front of everybody, just like crazy, crazy meltdown. And then that was the end of that relationship.
So this
And
was after you were already there working for.
yeah, and I've kind of known these things about her, so I kept a distance, and she was very nice for a long time, but more kind of interact with this person, the more just kind of like the mask starts to come off, and it's kind of like she started saying some things, and I was like, I could tell the signs. I've received enough trauma from enough people to understand like where this is going. So it's like, all right, I need to just pack my bags and get out before it gets any worse. And it just started kind of rolling, and someone came and said, "Well, you're gonna get out of here." And I said, "Okay, bye."
Did you know this about this person before you started there?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's really important, right? It's important to know that we're kind of choosing to go into the lion's den per se, right? Would you say that knowing that about this person may have created a way of being in your relationship with her as avoidant?
Um, I don't know if I would use the word avoidant, but maybe some synonym in that,
In that
like
realm?
evasive. Like I wouldn't say avoidant because I definitely didn't avoid her. Maybe I avoided getting close to her for sure, but I definitely try to keep a very professional working relationship.
And do you feel like you kept as much information flowing between the two of you as you would if you felt safe with her? And I'm not making you right or wrong. There's an important piece of this.
As much information. I mean, I tried to exchange as much information about what I was doing as possible, right? Like I didn't share my personal thoughts and feelings about what was happening around me because that's a little bit more personal.
Sure, sure. But you feel like you gave her all the information that she would need to feel like the two of you were on the same page.
Yeah, and that didn't really help in the end after all.
Okay. Well, you we kind of knew that going in that this
Yeah.
was playing with fire a bit, right? Is there anything that you see looking back that you feel truthfully that you could take ownership for that may have contributed in any way to the breakdown?
Um, yeah, I mean, sure, I could have been, I was very to myself. I could have been a little bit more, I don't really, I'm not really sure actually because she presents herself as someone who's very busy, like I don't have much time for this. And so I don't know if there's much more I could have done directly to her, but I probably could have been a little bit more open to people around me and maybe had a little bit more allies on my side that maybe could have helped her perception of whatever it was that she was seeing.
Okay. Okay. So I'm just looking for an opening for you. This is what I'm trying to do, an opening for
Okay.
you that if you wanted to reach out and try, and look, you don't have to do this in person. You could write a letter, right? You could, however you want to do this, but it always helps to start with how I can, you could say like, look, you know, due to personal experiences, I know that maybe I tend to keep more to myself than other people or not share as much as other people. And I've experienced that other people have perceived that in ways that I would never intend. So I would like to, apologize if that went into feeling like I was not the right fit for you or caused any kind of stress or confusion on your part. I very much enjoyed working with that horse, and I really do hope that everything goes well for you. And do you see what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, that
I
does sound like a good advice for interacting with her directly in some way. I was also thinking about reaching out to a mutual first just to kind of test the waters and see what their thoughts are. Maybe that might start to bridge a little bit of a gap.
Well, what's the worst that could happen? Think of it this way. What's the worst that could happen? She could send you a horrible email, right?
Um, uh, I don't know.
What? You look like you thought of something and then
Well, I mean, I kind of do because to do this, it's kind of like I'm making myself vulnerable for
right.
some. Like I'm giving her thought of me as like, okay, well, I'm giving her what she wanted by doing this. But that's just a humility thing on my part. Like, why should I really care?
But that's really a truthful and thank you, very honest thought that we all have in these kinds of situations. I'm not giving that person what they want. I'm not going to be the one. Why do I have to do? They're crazy. And, I don't want to hand them this. It's what it feels like. But I mean, I can only speak for myself, but if I saw another human being take that kind of stance in the situation you're describing, I would think that's one powerful human being. That's one powerful person who knows themselves and and is not afraid to step into situations of conflict. We cause so much conflict in our life trying to avoid conflict. We see everything for its potential to have conflict, right? And so because we see that and we're conflict avoidant, then what we end up doing is doing everything in our power to avoid the conversation that we need to have, to avoid seeing that person or being in that situation. And a lot of times, those actions are then interpreted by the other person in a myriad of ways that aren't true, which leads to even more probability of conflict. Whereas if we can start to build our own confidence by speaking our truth and taking things on and being accountable, then we will feel less powerless and avoidant around a possible conflict. A lot of these times there is no conflict except we're afraid of what could possibly happen. And then what we find is that when we're proactive in our communication, we actually have more opportunities for connection than possibilities for conflict because we have taken that space. And by even holding that space, we de-escalate the charge in situations, right? I think I told you guys I've got about 15 minutes and then I gotta run. But I think I told you guys a story, and if you heard it already, bear with me. But it was probably um, one of the best examples that I ever had of breaking a a rut, a cycle with a family member. And it had to do with my grandmother. And my mother was a hot mess her whole life, well known in the family, hot mess. So, being her oldest daughter, there was a lens I was viewed in around fear of would I become like her? And I can I can totally understand that. But what happened was my grandmother, I was a single mom, and she, because my mother was a party person and was always out and leaving her kids with whoever would watch them. Anytime I said I was going to go out and do anything fun or have any kind of a life, she would always tell me that I should be home with my children. You should be home with your children. Now, I was living in New York at the time, and I never did anything. I was always working. And I was she called me and I was talking to her, and I really wanted to be closer to her. And I wanted to tell her that I was actually going out to dinner that night because I was very excited to go see friends. And I knew what she'd say. I could have written the script. And I held back for a moment. And then I thought, no, no, because I am not doing anything wrong. And I want to have an open relationship with my grandmother. So I'm going to tell her. So I said, I'm going out to dinner tonight and I'm really excited. And of course, like clockwork, she told me I should be home with my children. I shouldn't be out, blah, 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 blah. And I just had this real calm sense of clarity in that moment. And I said, this isn't mine. When you say those things to me, it makes me feel like you think I'm a bad mother. And I'm not a bad mother. And I don't go out a lot. So I love you, but I'm going to hang up the phone now. And I'll talk to you later. And I hung up. And a few days later, I got a card in the mail that said, I'm so sorry. It was never my intention to make you feel that way. I think you're a wonderful mother. And I love you very much. And from that day on, our relationship was closer than it had ever been. And I never edited myself and didn't tell my grandmother what was happening in my life. Now, granted, you ask any of my family members, and they will tell you that she didn't change the way she treated everyone, but she did change the way she treated me. So, and if it went the other way, I would just continue to have the relationship I had. But if it stepped into that realm, I would continue to say, I love you, but I'm hanging up the phone. That's what it looks like. Is there anything? I know I'm trying to get a lot. I know I'm trying to get a lot into a short period of time. Now, I think, Lauren, are you here? I know she was just trying to get on.
Yeah, I'm juggling a lot of things right now. So
Oh, okay.
I had to jump off and now I had to jump back on because Kaiser was calling me.
Okay. Okay. Is there anything that you wanted to add? Anything that you think is like really important when we're talking about conflict and building relational ways of being based on your experience and your training?
Um, Repeat that again. This is like the worst time to be asking me a question. I'm like, I just got off the phone with Kaiser. I'm like trying to coordinate, but yeah, what was it? What was the question?
So if you had anything from your personal experience or your training in RLT or anything that you would just any tip that you would want to give around how to be more relational around conflict or making repairs. Is there anything that stands out to you that you really like to use yourself?
I mean, for me, the big thing is definitely taking a break and kind of knowing your triggers when you're activated. That's like the number one thing I would say is to know when you're starting to get activated and when you start to feel the signs of you going into a place where you normally say things that you're going to regret, or that you start to shut down to such a point where you're like blocking the other person where they feel like they're not being heard. I would say that that's another sign as well where you're probably overloaded and need to take a break, and not relying on the other person, even if they're more activated than you, for them to take the break. You need to be the one to take the break. And even if you see it in your partner as being the one that's acting a little um, irrational.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the big ones, and I think it's actually, as simple as it sounds, it can be a really hard one, a really difficult one, because in the moment we can feel very self-righteous in what we're saying or doing. Um, so that's one, and I mean, another simple one is just saying sorry. I mean, I
So
know,
hard.
again, it's so simple, but it's like when you're able to come back and just say, hey, like, and it might not be the content that was the problem, but maybe your delivery. So if you can take ownership of even just the delivery and be like, hey, I wanted to convey this. It came out like this, and I'm sorry that it came out that way, and let's maybe talk about this later. I do want to talk about this subject maybe, but let's do it maybe tomorrow,
Mm-hmm.
and let me know what time would be good for you. Because then you're creating this sort of little contract between the two of you to agree on a time, and they'll the other person will hopefully be more open to
Yeah.
that discussion.
Yeah.
But yeah, hopefully that's helpful. I mean, I know it's so simple, but when you really get down to a lot of these things, those two things are really the biggest things and the hardest. Everything else is kind of more the, fine tuning, and a lot more of the it's I don't know, it's a lot more meticulous, but this is just like the general. If I'm going to just give general advice of what I see most often being the problem, it's usually communicating when we're activated, or trying to, and not being able to say sorry once we're calmed down.
And I like that distinction of like sometimes what we say may be the words may be good, right? But maybe the face we're making, the tone we're using charges those words in a completely different way. So taking ownership of that and saying, look, I realize, I didn't say that didn't come out in the way it was intended. Let me start over, or um, let me say this in the way that I intended.
Yeah. And I think that another thing that I personally have used is with, at least with my partner, is that I always kind of go back to what his intention is. And even if I don't agree with him, I just go, okay, this is a person though that I know cares about me. And even though it's coming at me strong and in a way that can be overwhelming sometimes, I go, okay, his intention though, like it's not because he's trying to be mean or whatever. His intention is good. It's just that we need to work on his delivery or his expectations or whatever that may be. But I need to do that in a calm way, because that's the other thing, is that if he's coming at me strong about something and then I meet him there, then that's when it becomes sort of a shit show.
And
So
that's we get to the idea of the request, right? Like you can make a request of your partner. That's totally fine, right? Because when we talk about, you can only change yourself, but you can make a request. They don't have to agree, but you
yeah,
can make the request and say, hey, can we agree that once we start getting activated or maybe starting to get nasty with each other that we're just going to put a pin in it and agree to come back and set a time to re-look at what the topic was and what we want to talk about.
Yeah. And making this distinction between boundaries and requests is important too.
We
Because a
yeah.
yeah, well, because a boundary is not like, hey, I want flowers for Valentine's Day. Like that's not a boundary. That's a request.
Yeah.
So, it's sometimes we just get them confused, and I think I see that a lot. So that's why I thought I would throw that out there as well to make that distinction.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
So just to kind of wrap things up, um, if anybody here is not on the First Fridays Facebook page, um, reach out to me, or you can look for it and request to join on Facebook. It would be, you'd see my big face with a hat, and it's a green background, and it says First Fridays, and it's a great place because it's a lot easier for me to upload the videos there and stay connected with everybody. The other thing is that so my schedule's been filling up with people that are interested in doing intensive. So what's an intensive is there's a virtual intensive and an in-person intensive where we partner and we go over all of the things that may be holding you back in your life from areas, whether it's relationships or your sense of purpose. And we work to clear out what's holding you back while we also build on what you want to see and what you want to create. And we do that through a series of steps that really map that out, architect that move forward. And we use IEMT and hypnotherapy to let go of what we don't need, what we're dragging behind us, what we don't need anymore. So if anybody is interested in learning more about that, it's on my website, or you can reach out to me. And then moving forward from that, I do 3 and 6 month mentoring um, contracts with people so that they can learn to apply that and start to integrate all of that into their life. Now, if you're interested in doing IEMT or hypnosis separate from all that, because one of the things when we talk about getting activated in these kinds of conversations and relationships, you can't control your nervous system. Like that's just not possible. But like when I think it was Rachel was talking about getting activated around this idea of being bullied and judged, you can though go back and work on that memory. And if you can dial down the charge of the memory, then it takes away a lot of that activation and you can have perspective. And it's kind of like if you imagine you have a glass inside of you, right? And all of the traumas and all of the negative experiences and all of your stresses and overwhelm are going into that glass. When that glass gets full, everything going in puts you in overwhelm and overflow, puts you over threshold. So anytime that we can drain some out of that glass, it's creating space so that you can handle and navigate things that are challenging or trying. So, yeah, if you're interested in that, that's also on my website. I think that, what do you guys think? Like, let me know. Like, I think that we could even go further in this conversation, and maybe I'm going to look at seeing who might want to join us next month to continue on this line, because clearly from the amount of feedback I've gotten and the amount of people that wanted to be here or want the recording, that this is something that um, people are really looking for, which means that it has the potential to have a lot of impact. So if you guys do, is there anything anybody wants to add before what is the name of the Facebook page? It's First Fridays. First Fridays, yeah. Does anybody have anything that they want to add before we wrap? Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much. And I hope you took notes and I hope you practice. And then I would love if you guys practice any of this in the next time that we get together, you bring some feedback. Sound good? All right. Bye.
Bye. Congrats, Grandma.
Thank
Gigi,
you.
Mimi.
Yay, babies.
Bye.
Bye.